We'll be drinking a real rockstar whiskey. Dark, full-bodied, aromatic, and with a lot of character. This is the Highland Park Dark Origins, a single malt whiskey from the Isle of Orkney. My name is Reinhard, and you are watching Bespoke Unit. Today, we'll be drinking the Dark Origins from Highland Park, one of the northernmost distilleries in Scotland. It is quite a characterful single malt that refers to the historical origins and to the roots and the founder of this very particular distillery. Being mostly of Viking origins, the people who came to Orkney, and as a matter of fact, the people who started distilling on Orkney, were some tough guys. One of them, the founder of the distillery, Magnus Jonsson, was a bit of a shady character. At night, he supposedly was firing up his illicit stills and being one of the early moonshiners up north in Scotland. So legend has it that the distillery was actually up and running for much longer than the official date of Highland Park's opening. But that was really when the tax officials came to Orkney and to the distillery and realized what was going on. And since then, the distillery had been officially registered and sort of in the books. Now, when we look at the bottle, it's a black, sleek bottle. It's got the establishing date 1798, which I was referring to right here, as an embossed emblem with the logo of the distillery at the bottom of the bottle. Up here, Dark Origins. It also says double first fill sherry casks. Now, that's quite an interesting maturation statement. The reason is rather simple. 80% first fill sherry casks, European and American oak, and refill sherry casks. So from that alone, there's supposedly a lot of color to this whiskey, and you wouldn't need additional E150 sugar caramel to darken the spirit, even though on the label here, there's no indication that it hasn't been colored. But there's an indication that the whiskey is non-chill filtered, which, as you very well know, usually gives a lot more body, structure, and depth to the mouthfeel and to the overall experience. What else is there to be found? An alcoholic volume level of 46.8%. The juice is distilled in Kirkwall on the Isle of Orkney, and the distillery proudly states, "We guarantee this whiskey to be distilled solely from the finest homegrown malt," which is also very interesting, given the fact that most of the malted barley for today's single malt production comes from just a few maltings on either the Scottish mainland or even down in England. In any case, let's get right to the tasting and the sensory evaluation of this beautiful liquid, because ultimately that's what you've come for. So, looking at the color, a very shimmering golden brown. As I said, I do not believe that E150 sugar caramel has been added to this, because you would get a lot of distinct color from the sherry casks already. The liquid is perfectly clear. The viscosity is thick, oily, slow running legs on the side of the glass. So it indicates a rather heavy and characterful spirit. Let's stick our nose right into this. It's a creamy, elegant, vanilla-driven first sensation. Woody. I get a little bit of the dried fruit characteristics that you would associate with Andalusian sherry. There's a bit of marzipan, nuts, roasted nuts, in particular walnuts. And only behind that, the smoke and the earthy, charred characteristics start to emerge. This is not really a very peated whiskey. You get a bit of that funky green characteristic that you would normally associate with a peated single malt Scotch. But it's more a salty, briny, and almost maritime sensation, and not your typical Islay peatiness of smoke and ash. And you can feel that this is a unique whiskey in terms of style and origin. You're probably missing an age indication on the bottle right here, because this is a typical variation of the so-called no age statement whiskies, or NAS whiskies, which means that you could use certain single malts below 10 years, where normally in former days people were scared to buy stuff that was younger than 10 years, for example. And Highland Park, in its normal rotation and standard portfolio, carries a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old. And this is somewhere sort of in the middle. With those particular casks, it's got a lot of depth and it's got a rich aromatic bandwidth, even though it's probably not the oldest juice that has been used for the assemblage of the Dark Origins here. So we're probably looking into spirits somewhere between 6, 8, maybe 12, 13, 14 years that were used here. Green walnuts even. A little bit of seaweed, soy sauce, some minerality, saltiness, like a fresh sea breeze. When you think of the Isle of Orkney, when the waves come rolling in and there's this very fresh saltwater spray right in your face, and you're standing next to the distillery, probably in the midst of a huge rain shower. You know, Scottish weather can be challenging, to say the least. However, this whiskey is not challenging, but rather pleasing. I have to confess, the complexity of the nasal expression is not overly abundant or exciting. It's a rather clear and concise portfolio of aromas that I'm detecting here, mostly driven by a vanilla and caramel sweetness up front, some of the dried figs, dates, and prunes, and a little bit of that nutty quality, only before the smokiness, the slight peat, which for me is an earthy peat quality, is then also mixed in with a little bit of seawater and the seaweed I mentioned before. Now let's take a sip of this juice. Way more character on the palate. Almost like a fiery beginning. There's ginger to start with. A little bit of chili heat at the tip of my tongue right here. Then the sweetness starts to emerge. Caramel, burned sugar caramel, and even crema catalana with a typical vanilla sort of creme brulee mix going on. In the very back, the green, walnutty and maritime sensation comes back. A rather clean, medium length finish. The alcohol, even though it has a warming sensation at the beginning, is balanced and quite nicely woven into the overall experience. Just a hint of tannins to keep your palate engaged and excited. So there's not an awful lot of tannins, which is quite interesting, giving those characterful casks, especially the first fill sherry casks that have been used. But it's sort of all nicely balanced and integrated. The alcohol, the tannins, the juiciness, the body, the mellowness and the structure in combination with the sweetness of this single malt. Second sip, again, the spicy beginning. Now there's a little bit of cinnamon even, then a layer of tonka bean, and ultimately It's sort of all rounded off by a touch of soy sauce, ginger that sort of reminds me of the typical serving you would get with sushi, where you have the pickled ginger and the soy sauce right next to each other. So most certainly, as we promised you at the beginning, a characterful rock-style whiskey that proudly shows off its muscles, a little bit of the strength and the youthfulness, but also some mellowness, depth, and a great balance to finish it all off. Well, so what else can be said about this whiskey? The packaging is quite distinct. I really like the look and feel of this dark sort of coated bottle with a poppy cork on top. Lovely presentation. Usually the boxes and the bottles of Highland Park are quite characterful, quite flashy, and very inspiring, I have to say, with a youthful presentation and sort of an interesting touch to it. So I really like that. The bottle of the Dark Origins will probably set you back 80 to 90 bucks depending on where you are around the world, which, given this is a non-age statement whiskey, is quite a bit, but it delivers on the experience, so the value for money is certainly there. In terms of versatility, well, you know, usually most people would suggest drinking your single malt straight out of a Glencairn glass or a nosing glass, which is probably a bit more elegant and refined, like the one that I'm using here. I wouldn't see an issue at all when pouring this whiskey over a block of ice, or even topping it off with a splash of ginger ale, ginger beer, or whatever your favorite mixer might be. I do not necessarily see this as your standard go-to cocktail whiskey or single malt, because you'd probably choose a less expensive variant. However, if you decide to mix your preferred cocktail with Dark Origins, you won't be disappointed. I'd probably go for something like a Rusty Nail, where you use the Scottish herbal liqueur Drambuie in combination with the single malt as a base spirit. You could make an old fashioned out of this, or a Rob Roy, which is a very classic Scotch whiskey cocktail using red vermouth. But as always, with a more elaborate and expensive base spirit, I would suggest keep it simple, choose a beverage that will truly highlight the base spirit and let the whiskey shine instead of overpowering it and coating it with something entirely different. When it comes to pairing suggestions, I'm a big fan of smoky characterful whiskeys with a very ripe Parmigiano, because the saltiness and the fattiness from the cheese will beautifully counterbalance some of that sweetness here. You could definitely sip this alongside your favorite cigar. I would choose something with quite a bit of character out of Nicaragua. In this particular case, I smoked a Rocky Patel with the Dark Origins. Gorgeous combination. Though I have to say, because this is 46.8% alcohol, I added quite a bit of water to tame down the alcoholic strength, which would otherwise interfere with my smoking experience. If you want to try something a bit more fancy and out there, get yourself some fresh oysters and pour a few droplets of the whiskey right onto your oyster before you start slurping away. That's just a mesmerizing experience, which is eye-opening, and you will wonder how you ever had oysters without whiskey before. Other than that, with this single malt, and usually I'm not a huge purist, as you very well know, I'd keep it simple, have it straight, have it neat, enjoy it. It's good value for money. It's got a great presentation and sort of overall experience to it. A nice little Viking story in the back. So with that, have fun, enjoy this beautiful single malt, and I'll see you next time right here at Bespoke Unit. Oh, one thing that I almost forgot. As always, I did a little write-up for you of our liquor formula, which was just updated recently, and now we use the same formula and the same review sheet for all various kinds of spirits and liqueurs. I believe it's a very accurate, precise, and still quite interesting and fun way to do your reviews. So you will find a PDF version underneath our video and with the write-up that we do on our website as always. There you can also find our various spirits guides, single malt write-ups, and other spirits reviews. So make sure to check out the Bespoke Unit website as well as our YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time right here with another exciting spirit.